Welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast. So today I'm going to talk about something that isn't necessarily about finance, but something that I've learned a lot of lessons on over the past few years, and that's JV partners. So a lot of people get into JVs off the back of courses, or they might get into JVs off the back of networking events, and very, very quickly those partnerships just fall apart. So for those of you that don't know, JVs are joint ventures. They're essentially where you partner up with someone else to go and do a project or build a property company or go into business together, whatever it may be. I have learned a lot over the last 3 to 5 years about JV partners, and also around the due diligence that you should do when getting into JVs. I have gone into 3 partnerships now, I think, off the top of my head, and all 3 of them have ended badly. I'm just in the process of entering my 4th one, which, touch wood, seems to be going all right so far. But I've learned some valuable lessons over the 3 that I have entered. The first one, so the first ever JV that I got into, was essentially me becoming an investor and then becoming a shareholder, and it all got quite complicated and convoluted. And at the time, I was only 23, I think it was, and I kind of got attached to this shiny penny. It was an SA business, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to get involved in that. The numbers look good, and it was dealing with, and I hope the person, I'm sure, will probably be listening and will probably not mind me saying this, but it was definitely in its infancy, the business, and I didn't do a huge amount of due diligence. I got excited, I invested straight away, and very quickly it became apparent that I think there was a element of being out of depth on all sides. So the first bit of due diligence I should have done, and hindsight is a wonderful thing, but I should have gone into more detail around actually how long has the business been trading, what has it accomplished so far, how is it trading month on month, is there a good profitability, how are we looking, can this business sustain itself? And had I done that, I very quickly would have realised that actually, no, the business couldn't have sustained itself. And I kept piling money in and very quickly realised that it was a mistake. So that was the first one I did, and I don't regret it because it created a great relationship moving forward, but it's a relationship that won't be business. So it was good in that sense, but I lost that money and I'll never get that money back. The second JV that I entered, I went into an already formed partnership. So I entered into a JV with 2 other people who were already business partners. That was probably one of the biggest mistakes I could ever make. And ironically enough, actually, the business that I am now going into, again, is with 2 people who are already in business together, albeit I joined far earlier in the process. But this second JV, they'd been in business together for years and years. I mean, we're talking probably between 5-6 years that they'd worked together. There was a unbreakable bond between these 2. The difficulty you find when entering a business like that is that you are immediately on the back foot. You are immediately only 1/3. You're up against 66% or 2/3. So I always found myself outvoted. I always found myself actually trying to take the business in one direction and finding that actually the other 2 wanted to go in the other direction. It was very, very difficult. So what I found with that one is, and the mistake I wouldn't make again, is that we didn't really have a shareholders agreement. So it was quite difficult. What we did have was very, very basic. But what I would definitely do moving forward is try and actually eliminate that 2/3 to a degree. So if you go into business with a partnership that's already formed, they get 50% of the vote, you get 50% of the vote, because what you don't want to do is end up in a situation where you're just constantly being outvoted, because otherwise you just have no influence over which way the business is going. So that was something I learned from that JV fairly swiftly. And then the last JV I entered was actually going into something with, it was about 6 of us, I think, in total. We all put cash in to the business. And again, I'm pretty sure the people involved will be listening to this, and I don't think they'll mind me saying this, but it was a mess from day one. So we all invested into this company, we all put money in, and the idea is that money would then be used as deposits and cash flow for things like legal fees, etc. What happened was there were too many cooks very, very early on. So 6, 7 of us straight away from the off. There's so much noise. There was no shareholders agreement, again, that was kind of formulated in a proper way. It was, again, very basic. But there were so many of us that you were just going in so many different directions all the time, no idea what you were actually going to end up working on or dealing with. And what ended up happening was very, very quickly, people started falling away. So we went from 7 to 5, and then from 5 to 4, 4 to 3, and I was one of the 3 that were remaining. And the problem is that as people left, they obviously took their contacts with them. They took potentially a buyout as well. So we'd all put £25,000 into the company to buy a share. And as each person left, they took 25 grand back out of the business. And the problem is that the pot that we did have dwindled off really quickly. So again, the issue you've got is there was only 3 of us left. And by that point, your money's gone on obviously buying your first deal, buying people back out of the business, etc. So again, very, very quickly, I learned that having that many people involved, you just have no influence over where the business is going. You have no influence over what the grand plan is moving forward. So that was definitely a lesson learned there. And I would say one of the other lessons that I learned off the back of that, again, was not leaving everything to one person. So again, the person who we work with on this one, I don't think would mind me saying that he was left to operate the entire business solo. And for whatever reason, that didn't work out. And then the entire business came crumbling down because everything was put onto him. All of the responsibility was on him. All of the financial responsibility was on him. It just put him in a position where he just had to deal with everything, and it just didn't work out. So very quickly, we came to realize that it just wasn't the right move. So a lot of lessons learned over those 3 JVs. And I guess if I was going to chuck some lessons out off the back of that as well, because it does make me sound very incompetent to a degree to not be able to go into JVs. But I think the problem is that you go into these things trusting people, trusting that you're going to get what you've put in back out, and that didn't happen, unfortunately. But some of the lessons I've learned, obviously shareholders agreement, without a shadow of a doubt, has to be in place before you go into anything, before any money changes hands, before any investments take place. An ironclad shareholders agreement just has to be there. So I won't enter into anything now unless there is an ironclad shareholders agreement, without a shadow of a doubt. The next thing is a clearly defined roles, responsibilities, and plan moving forward. So without a shadow of a doubt, there has to be this is what your responsibility is. This is what you do on a day-to-day basis. This is what we expect from you. This is what we expect from the team. And this is where we're going. Because in the first 3 JVs, we never had that. No one knew what was going on. And we were all left in a position of, well, what are we doing? How are we moving this thing forward? Whereas now, as I enter into what is going to be my 4th one, we have clear defined roles. We have a shareholders agreement. I know that I'm responsible for everything financial to do with that business. I'm taking on a full FD role. I'm responsible for money in, money out. I'm responsible for the invoices. I'm responsible for making sure that Xero is all up to date. I'm responsible for the bookkeeping, everything. So I know anything financial with that business is my responsibility. And that's great because that sets a clearly defined boundary. Everyone else knows that I'm responsible for the finance. And so therefore, if anything goes wrong with the finance, I'm accountable for that immediately. And it's just a really nice way of kind of setting those boundaries. So once you've done your due diligence on the people you're going into business with, and whether that be talking to other people within property, whether that be company's house, whether it be however you decide to do it, what you then need to do, enter into that shareholders agreement, sort out all of your bank accounts, sort out who's responsible for everything, who's responsible for this, that, etc. And then off the back of that as well, one lesson that I'll finish on is make sure there's a clearly defined catch-up. So we're going to catch up once a week, we're going to catch up once a month, whatever it may be. Have that set there and attend it. Don't let that lapse, because there's nothing worse than a JV where people aren't fully invested. So set those clearly defined. We're going to attend at this point. We're going to do this. This is our goal, our aim, etc. from this specific meeting. Have an agenda, everything else, and just make sure that it's run like a proper business. But yeah, lots of lessons learned over a few years of JVs, and fingers crossed, 4th time lucky. I've definitely learned some really, really valuable lessons from a few of these. So hopefully none of you will make the same mistakes that I've made. But if you do, I think one thing I would say is keep your cool. Just remember that, or try and take the emotions out of it to a degree, because A lot of people, when their JV starts to go south or when it starts to go bad, they'll jump on social media, they'll start bad-mouthing one another, or they'll go legal or whatever it may be. But I would just say try and keep your cool. If things start to go wrong, identify where they've gone wrong, identify who's at fault, if there is anyone at fault, and then work through it from there, because there's nothing worse than a JV that goes incredibly toxic, because it can just have a massive effect all around. And again, touch wood, I've been very lucky that the JVs I've been in have all ended amicably, albeit the business has had its issues, but myself and partners have kind of parted ways relatively amicably. And it's just so much nicer than these ones that you see on social media where they're hurling stuff at one another. So yeah, I would just say if things start to go bad, just try and take the emotion out of it as best you can. But yeah, those are my lessons learned from JVs. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this one. I shall catch you on the next one.